This is Defense Domain, your source for strategic insight on global security, defense systems, and geopolitical risk. This is the weekly strategic brief. Week 15 covers the period from April 11 to April 17, 2026. This week marks a transition from escalation towards structured, coercive competition. The breakdown of United States and Iran negotiations has shifted conflict management away from diplomacy toward coordinated pressure mechanisms. Washington has combined naval blockade enforcement with secondary financial sanctions, extending pressure from the maritime domain into global trade and financial networks. At the same time, Iran has signaled selective reopening of the Strait of Hormuz under its own regulatory framework. This creates a contested operating environment where restriction and access coexist, and where global shipping operates under persistent uncertainty. Turning to the regional level, a temporary ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon has paused a secondary conflict theater. The arrangement is time-bound, approximately 10 days in duration, and linked to wider Iran-related diplomacy. However, core issues remain unresolved, including Hezbollah's role and Israel's force posture. This indicates that the ceasefire is not a pathway to resolution, but a mechanism to contain spillover and manage escalation risk. Beyond the Middle East, the war in Ukraine continues to evolve. Strikes on ports, logistics hubs, and energy infrastructure have intensified. These are not isolated attacks. They form part of a systematic economic warfare strategy. At the same time, Europe is institutionalizing defense-industrial integration, using battlefield data to accelerate weapons development, and linking active conflict directly to long-term military innovation. Turning to the operational assessment of the Iran war, the conflict has now exceeded 45 days. It began on February 28, 2026. It has involved more than 10 conflict theaters and directly affected over 20 countries. Missile activity has exceeded 120 waves. More than 35 Iranian naval vessels have been degraded. At least 30 commercial vessels have been attacked or damaged, and over 350 tankers have been halted or rerouted. From a structural perspective, the conflict has moved through distinct phases. It began with decapitation strikes. It expanded through proxy activation and maritime disruption. It evolved into sustained energy and infrastructure targeting. It escalated into long-range strikes with nuclear-adjacent risk. It transitioned into systemic multi-domain warfare, and it has now entered a coercive control phase, defined by blockade, sanctions, and selective maritime access. Turning to operational dynamics, the conflict is no longer driven by escalation alone. It is now structured as a coercion system, combining military, economic, and maritime tools. The maritime domain has become a controlled pressure environment, where blockade enforcement, selective transit permissions, and interdictions operate simultaneously. Economic warfare is fully integrated into military operations. Financial pressure reinforces physical restrictions. Proxy warfare continues, but it is no longer the primary driver of escalation. Energy systems remain the central pressure node. Disruption and controlled reopening of flows shape global economic impact. At the same time, diplomatic channels have reemerged, but without resolving underlying conflict drivers. Turning to the Strait of Hormuz, the maritime environment has evolved through multiple stages, from initial disruption to sustained attacks and rerouting, to systemic pressure on energy flows, and now to a dual control structure. In the current phase, the United States enforces blockade measures, while Iran applies selective access and route control. This creates a competitive control model, rather than a single authority. Commercial traffic has partially resumed, but only under constraint. This is not normalization. It is controlled instability. From a structural perspective, the Strait is no longer a transit corridor. It is a managed pressure zone. Turning to coercive pressure architecture, the collapse of negotiations has produced a coordinated system of pressure. The United States combines naval enforcement with financial sanctions, extending coercion into global networks. Iran responds by maintaining leverage through controlled access, allowing passage selectively, while preserving the ability to restrict flows. This creates a system where pressure and access operate simultaneously, shaping trade and escalation dynamics in parallel. Turning to the Ukraine war, reciprocal infrastructure targeting has intensified. Ukrainian drone strikes are targeting Black Sea assets, including fuel storage and export infrastructure. Russian strikes focus on Danube port facilities and alternative trade routes. These are sustained strike patterns, indicating a shift towards systematic economic warfare, targeting sustainment capacity rather than frontline positions. At the tactical level, drone warfare continues to expand. Ukraine is integrating aerial and ground unmanned systems with infantry operations. Russia maintains large-scale drone and missile pressure across multiple axes. Drones are no longer supporting assets. They are central to battlefield execution. Turning to energy and maritime security, the Strait of Hormuz has entered a controlled access phase. Transit has not fully stopped, but it remains significantly reduced and selective. This creates a dual control system, where neither side exercises full authority, increasing uncertainty for commercial operators and insurers. At the same time, energy infrastructure remains vulnerable. Strikes on Saudi facilities temporarily disrupted production, including the East-West pipeline corridor. However, recovery was rapid. Capacity was restored within days. This highlights both vulnerability and resilience within global energy systems. Escalation risks are expanding beyond the Strait. Iran has warned of potential retaliation against Gulf infrastructure. The United States is expanding pressure through potential secondary sanctions. At the same time, tanker interdictions and rerouting continue. This extends risk across regional ports, commercial shipping, and third-party actors. Looking ahead, Europe is preparing for a post-conflict role. France and the United Kingdom have initiated discussions on a multinational maritime security mission, focused on securing navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, while avoiding current blockade participation. This indicates early planning for a stabilization framework. Turning to hybrid threats, Russian cyber operations are expanding in scale and intent. Hundreds of email accounts linked to Ukrainian state institutions have been compromised. This includes prosecutors and governance structures. The objective appears to be systematic intelligence collection and vulnerability mapping. Beyond Ukraine, similar intrusions have been observed across NATO and European systems. This reflects a shift from isolated cyber attacks to network-level mapping and monitoring. At the same time, cyber tools are targeting financial systems. A Russia-linked cryptocurrency exchange associated with sanctions evasion was forced to suspend operations. In parallel, Russian officials have publicly identified European defense industrial sites as potential targets, including facilities linked to drone production. This combines cyber disruption with information signaling, shaping both financial resilience and political risk perception. Turning to defense technology and industry, the Ukrainian battlefield is now functioning as a structured testing environment. Germany has formalized access to real-time combat data. This allows battlefield performance to feed directly into weapons development, reducing adaptation timelines and embedding operational experience into industrial processes. Drone production is also scaling. New agreements with European partners focus on large-scale manufacturing, moving from tactical use to standardized and industrialized production models. At the same time, artificial intelligence is entering command structures. France is developing a data-centric command system designed to integrate battlefield inputs into real-time decision-making. This reflects a shift toward AI-enabled operations and highlights the importance of technological sovereignty. External technological support is also shaping conflict dynamics. Reports indicate that Iran used a Chinese-provided satellite system to monitor and target United States military positions. This demonstrates how external systems can enhance targeting capability and extend competition into the intelligence domain. Turning to naval capabilities, North Korea has tested cruise and anti-ship missiles from a new destroyer platform. This reflects a shift toward integrated maritime strike capability, rather than isolated missile deployments, and signals an expansion of deterrence capacity. Turning to global power competition, Europe is showing signs of strategic divergence. Spain has called for a larger role for China in global governance, while Italy has suspended defense cooperation with Israel. This indicates more flexible and issue-based alignment, rather than fixed bloc positioning. At the same time, indirect alignment between major powers is expanding. United States intelligence suggests that China may be preparing deniable missile transfers to Iran through third countries. This reflects a pattern of proxy-enabled competition, reducing direct confrontation, while increasing complexity. Russia is also expanding deterrence signaling by identifying European industrial targets linked to Ukraine support. This extends pressure beyond the battlefield into the defense industrial domain. Within Europe, political dynamics are shifting. Hungary's electoral change reduces internal friction within the European Union, improving coordination on Ukraine-related decisions. At the alliance level, United States and Turkey discussions on the S-400 system continue. A potential resolution could reopen defense industrial cooperation, including pathways toward the F-35 program. This reflects efforts to stabilize NATO cohesion. Turning to long-term risks, North Korea continues to expand its nuclear capabilities. Developments at Yongbyon indicate increased uranium enrichment and reactor activity. This strengthens production capacity and reinforces proliferation risks in East Asia. In the Indo-Pacific, multinational military exercises are expanding. Joint drills involving the United States, Australia, and the Philippines are increasing in scale, with additional participation from Japan. This reflects a shift toward structured and integrated defense coordination. Turning to systemic risk, the United Nations has warned that prolonged disruption in the Strait of Hormuz could impact global food systems. Energy and fertilizer supply constraints could reduce agricultural output, particularly in import-dependent regions. Rising transport and energy costs may further accelerate food price inflation. This highlights how maritime disruption extends beyond energy markets into global food security. From a cross-domain perspective, several structural signals are emerging. Coercive pressure is expanding across both physical and financial domains. Maritime control is shifting from dominance to contested and overlapping authority. Defense industrial systems are becoming networked and integrated through active conflict. And temporary stabilization mechanisms are increasingly used to manage escalation, rather than resolve it. Looking ahead to next week, key developments include the launch of multinational exercises on April 20, continued monitoring of Hormuz transit under dual control conditions, the expiration of the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire, ongoing United States and Turkey negotiations, and potential shifts in Russian military activity following the Easter truce. This was the Defense Domain Weekly Strategic Brief. For more in-depth analysis, visit defensedomain.com. Stay informed. Stay strategic.